And I'm just asking the question: is this the last ride for this version of the Toronto Raptors?
I have one somewhat linked to this, so we can double dip here, but I won't reveal it. Let's talk Nurse.
So Fred VanVleet also probably hitting free agency. What happens there is part of this. But Nick Nurse this week says he will see where he's at the end of the year. You have a Toronto Star column really kind of linking them to Ime Udoka to come in and replacers. Nurse is getting some link to the Houston Rockets. This just feels like it is shaping up to the end of something for me, Brendon. You read what he said. You don't really say that unless you're probably thinking you're probably going to leave. The reporting out of Toronto linking them to Udoka seems pretty strong. He obviously has ties to Masai Ujiri, and someone was going to hire Udoka. Regardless, what happened there is obviously not great, but he's considered this really, really high end coach and won a lot of games. And someone was going to hire him. It just was a matter of when, not if. And it seems like it might be Toronto. And it also just seems like over time, Nurse is a guy that can maybe need a different voice there. Maybe you need a different kind of grading, kind of grinding personality for that locker room. I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean, it was telling to me that he went and brought in Nate Bjorker in after Nate Bjorker got fired in part because of Indiana, because of kind of the way he interacted with players, and he became a Nurse guy back there. So I just feels like there's going to be changes in Toronto. I don't know what that exactly looks like. I don't know how drastic they will be. They obviously have Barnes and Siakam and a lot of guys at the center of this. But Nurse, who won a title with them, moving on perhaps, and maybe Fred leaving as well. This feels like a trend. We're leading into a different version of Toronto coming out the other side next fall.
It's a team that's been confusing as to why it has underperformed, right? It's one of these teams where I feel like you look at the talent. Does it always fit together perfectly? I guess not, right? The way that the roster is built, it's very heavy on a certain type of player, which is this versatile 6'8" or so guy. It's nice in theory. It makes you look sexy when it comes to modern basketball, but when Fred VanVleet is the only player who can really handle the ball or shoot that consistently is on the floor, that can backfire. And so I'm not trying to say it's some sort of perfect sleeping giant that Nick Nurse just botched, but the talent is together better than I think the win totals have been, right? Even Tampa Bay, we can give them some slack for the COVID season when they were not even at their home arena, not even in their home country. But last year and this year,
Tampa was bad vibes.
Yeah, understandably, right? But last year and this year, I just think they've underachieved relative to what they have. And so it's a little confusing to me why, and I guess it sort of makes you understand why a coach would be the one to fall on the sword a little bit. Honestly, my takeaway seeing a lot of this was not to, rehash things that are in the past, but it's really not the too distant past. And I just look at what they didn't do at the trade deadline, which was get rid of anybody. They actually added. And yes. I don't know where I come down on it. I think that there's something to be said for maybe they re-sign some of the players, VanVleet or Trent or whatever, keeping OG Anunoby and just seeing how he continues to develop. It's not like his value's just tanking after the deadline. You could easily trade him at the draft and get just as much, if not more. But I look at it and I'm like, is there a little bit of a power struggle, power move happening with Masai? I don't know anything, obviously, about the background behind the scenes of this team, but the roster continuity and sort of resistance to change, coupled with Nurse not being able to get the most out of it. It's like, yeah, we know how basketball works. We know how sports works. Nurse is going to be the one to get fired. But is a coach going to fix this if Masai is sort of stuck in his ways or determined to have things be a certain way? I don't know. It's very much a push and a pull, but I guess I don't think it's necessarily fair or reasonable to kind of pile on Nurse without looking at the bigger picture.
No, I agree. I'm not even trying to pile on Nurse, but I think there's
I don't think you are, but I think if he leaves, that will be the narrative is he failed this team or he just screwed this up or whatever, because that's what happens with coaches.
You do sometimes need a voice change. Mm-hmm. That happens, right? That absolutely happens where you get to a spot where you just need a different voice in the locker room. I think that's not an uncommon thing where you just kind of we need to hear from somebody different. And sometimes you can go incorrectly and do something wrong there, but like sometimes like you just need a different persona, and like you just need to change it up.
There's been stuff with him and Pascal for a while, right? There was the suspension a couple years ago where he like left the game early, and then there's been some, is Pascal happy stuff that seems to kind of bubble up here and there. Neither one of us know, but that's something you could easily point to as a reason why Nurse maybe hasn't had his voice heard, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Just quickly before we move on to the next topic, do you like the idea of him in Houston?
So I checked out the Locked On Rockets discussion of the rumor, and Ali Khan Bijani, who's a good like X's and O's guys on the Rockets, broke down the fact that actually the limitations of what Nurse has been able to get out of the Toronto offense doesn't lend itself to kind of bringing the best out of what Houston's offense has been, in that both are very ISO heavy and both are very much just like, let's see what our guys can do. And he kind of brought up like Houston needs more connectivity, more structure for their offense, and Nurse hasn't really given that to the Raptors. So I think Nurse, from the perspective of sort of being a more seasoned coach than Steven Silas is, maybe you just hope that like kind of behind the scenes he's able to get things together. I don't really know how much hope there is for that in Houston, with how much the insiders seem to tell us things are broken and hopeless over there. But Nurse makes sense that from that standpoint. I just don't know if he makes a ton of sense to be the guy who gets the most of what Jalen Green is from a talent standpoint, or what, Kevin Porter is from a talent standpoint. Offensively.
Yeah, I think they have like a lot of other things they need to figure out that are bigger than Nick Nurse, and I don't know if Nick Nurse just is like giving you exactly kind of what you need. Like it just seems like there are bigger organizational issues, and I just like I can't imagine like the most bizarro like weird NBA summer to me would be like Harden goes back there, they get another high draft pick. And they hire Nick Nurse. Like, what are we even doing here? Like, what is
Harden,
this just
Wemby, and Nurse all to Houston? That's what's happening. That's what's coming.
And Nurse is just like demanding Harden like play his like really connective like pressure defense, and Harden's like, I didn't do that in freaking Philly all the time. Like, why would I do that now? Like, I didn't. I came here because I love Houston, and like I want to be here.
Trying to have a good time, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, bro.
Let's not really
I was out where they have a banner up for me till 3 a.m. last night. Like, what do you want? What do you want from me? I just, it doesn't. If I was Nick Nurse, I'd be taking like a year off and just like waiting. I think like any good coach, honestly, if you leave a job, unless you're just need to be an NBA head coach and like need to do that, which like that's a Tibbs thing. Like that's a thing in European soccer, like with a lot of guys.
Worked for Thomas Tuchel.
Did not work for
Did
Antonio
not work
Conte.
for Quinn Snyder. It did not work for Quinn Snyder.
Did
in
not
my
work
opinion,
for Antonio.
I wouldn't want to land in Atlanta.
I mean, it seems like he got some personnel decision-making power there, which is like, good for him. Did not work for Antonio Conte, pretty clearly. But,
yeah. So trial and error,
like,
wins and losses. But Nurse, I agree. I mean, I think
I don't.
I wouldn't rush into a Houston role, I guess is where I'm coming from.